Welcome to Mature Allure, where we highlight the experiences and perspectives of women in midlife. Today, I'm really excited about having as our guest Tori-Ann Hampton. Hi, Tori-Ann. How are you?
Hi, Sherri. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about Tori-Ann. Who is she? What does she do?
Thank you. I started as an educator. I have nearly 2 decades now of experience as an educational executive, and I've kind of dedicated my life to designing and facilitating human-centered learning opportunities that, spark innovation, get people thinking critically about how to solve problems and empower creative problem solving because that's where the workforce is like moving toward, right? We have a lot of problems. We need
Yes.
to zoom out and start thinking about how might we explore these challenges that we're facing. So I've worked with um, elementary, middle, high school students, educators, nonprofit organizations to do this work. I'm also an actor, so that helps me out a lot when it comes to speaking and playing games and getting in there and wanting to figure it out.
Mhm.
Um, I've been curious my whole life, trying to understand something. If there's something, I'll watch a TV show and I'll do all the research while I'm watching the show to
Mhm.
understand the historical context of what's going on, what was happening, what really happened, what's the true story. So
Hmm.
everything the way I work plays into how I live as well.
That sounds good. Would you consider what you do creative, like problem solving and solutions? Would you think of that as like pivoting? Because some people have a hard time, like life comes and hits you. Believe me, I know. And you just gotta pivot.
Yes, I was not always great at pivoting. Um, it requires like a lot of self-reflection, a lot of there's this new term, well, recent term in education, social emotional learning, where you're
Hmm.
focusing on like self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision making, all these competencies that we didn't get as children in the
No.
learning spaces, but there's opportunity to bring that into our workspaces so that we can say, okay, like let's take the focus off of the people who are
Mhm.
doing the thing and let's look at the people who are experiencing the problem.
Mm.
If you take it off of yourself, it's a lot easier to talk about what the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say an instructional designer or and
Mhm.
facilitator, can you go into that? I know you've explained it a little bit, but in a little more detail. Can you
Yeah,
explain it? Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So, as an instructional designer, this is where I guess a pivot comes in for me within my own profession. It's a quite natural pivot for educators. Instructional designers focus on finding cognitive gaps in training and development within an institution or business and design learning that will benefit the team, staff, employee to know how to make that sandwich. So it could even be like, okay, we are making this sandwich at restaurant A, and this person makes the sandwich really, really well, but how do we train everyone to make the sandwich,
Mm.
like to use this magic sauce? So designing um, professional learning experiences for teams who want more continuity within the scope of business or service that they're providing. I do this a lot with educators, making sure that, okay, we're delivering this program. Can we deliver it with more fidelity? What is the cognitive gap? Why does this person understand it in this way? But if I go over here, this person understand they're using two different definitions um,
Mm.
for the same term. So how can we clear that up? And is that even the problem that we're having? So
Yeah.
instructional designers are truly looking at, what is happening. Let me observe. Let me figure out what the cognitive gap is. What do employees or talent team members need to learn? And then let me design that experience. And that could be a live in-person training, which you might be facilitating. That could be a online experience that someone's going through.
Mhm.
Um, on their own, but it's really about figuring out, like, what is that point? What's that magic sauce? How do we turn that miserable into magical for the team member who has to go through the experience?
So can this process be used in any industry, or is there, I know you said you work with mainly teachers and educators, but what other industries is this like good for, or have you worked in?
Yeah, this is great for any, like, I've seen this position with, as I mentioned before, food restaurants or
Mhm.
like specifically chains, especially if you're trying to get that fidelity across the board. Um, Credit card companies, I've seen a lot of, like, how do customer service, how are we training our folks to um, communicate with our customers and clients so that we're getting those higher scores of success rates, right?
Mhm.
So, again, my expertise is in education, but typically an instructional designer works with a subject matter expert. So it's not that I need to know what is what is it that they need to do. I would coordinate with a subject matter expert because
Mhm.
I know to teach. I understand how people learn, and like I said, it was a quite natural pivot as a classroom teacher to move into this industry because learning is universal. Like
Mhm.
it's constant, and companies want that continuous learning model. They want to implement that within their programs so that they can see the success rates. They want to see how, if I support and nurture and develop the talent that I have, how can that impact our bottom line? That's essentially it.
Yeah. Well, when you're putting together a program for, let's say, any company, when you're putting one together, how do you go about, along with working with the subject matter experts, how do you go along how do you put about a plan? Do you include like team building, coaching? Like, how do you kind of put that together, and what percentage? I know I'm asking a lot, maybe, but like just so people can understand a little bit more, because even when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, I'm really interested in this. I wasn't quite sure, like,
Yeah.
really what it meant, you know, but I'm like, wow, okay, this is interesting. So how do you go about putting together a plan or a program?
No, that's a great question. I think that as an instructional designer, as an educator, as anyone in your field, you have your system and protocols that you follow.
Mhm.
And if you have a framework on how to design, whether it's a space or it's a system or it's, a learning goal, you first have to start with what's the initial ask, right? The managers are coming and they're saying, "Oh, this is a solution that we need." Do we know that that is the solution? Like,
Mm.
what evidence do we have? So typically what I like to do, and I'm working on a project right now where I've been given a starter request, and I'm guiding our design team through our strategy design. So basically we're looking at, here was the starter request, what challenges can are coming up with this request, like that we feel we could be successful with that request. It also involves us talking to, interviewing, observing stakeholders. Who are the key stakeholders in this project? Like, who is this going to impact? Who are the decision makers?
Mhm.
Who are the voices that who are going to have to report to on the success of this, starter request? What are our metrics that we're going to be measuring?
Mhm.
And what does success look like? What are our guiding principles? So by having a design strategy, we're going in with like our North Star, and then we're bringing in our learner perspective. That could be an empathy map, that could be learner persona, and we're making a seat for that person, for that learner. as we are designing, because it's not about what the manager, senior management thinks they need to solve the problem. It's about like, what does this person need in order to grow in that area?
Mm-hmm.
So really starting with building your understanding around that, so you can have a clear North Star as you begin designing, and you're clear about the metrics, because everyone wants to know what's the impact of the outcome and how does this affect our bottom line. So
Mm-hmm.
once we have that in place, bring in subject matter experts to ideate and brainstorm with us on some of those solutions. Our team might do that because it's a collaborative effort, truly. So finding the right people to work with and that you do a really great job collaborating with is key in any kind of creative process. So once we ideate and kind of think about the structure of what it is we are going to design, that's when we might outline kind of the content, right? That's when we get into the content, because we're clear, we have our strategy focus, we know the desired outcomes of what we're designing. We have clear objectives that align with the goals of the project that we want the learner to be able to do after going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And we have assessments or tasks that or activities that align with showing if the learner has completed that and to what degree. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when we bring in the content experts, the subject matter experts to review. Like, is
Yeah.
this what you were talking about? And a lot of times people will give you either what they've used before and the outcomes of that learning. So you'll be able to go through and kind of see, and as an educator, like really see like, okay, they wanted their learners to achieve this goal, do these activities, get them to achieving that goal. Like, was it
Mm-hmm.
effective? Did it impact the learner? And also, did the learner like going through the process? That's a huge learn something. You gotta like get into it, right?
Exactly. And I was going to ask you, like, do you get pushback, whether it's from managers or learners, and how do you deal with that?
Oh yeah, pushback is part of it. It's a big part of it. You're gonna get feedback constantly on what should have been done, or not liking this part, or this didn't work at all. And one of the ways to kind of mitigate that is to pilot and test out what it is that you're putting out there. Like, don't just, we made the
Mm-hmm.
thing and then boom, we are putting it out to everyone. Don't do that. And don't be like, I learned this. I was like, oh, I made this new program and I thought it was so clear. And I was like, oh, I am 90% sure. Like, I was giving percentage rates on how successful I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned after implementing it, like, oh, people and watching people use it, because that's huge. You have to
Mm-hmm.
watch, how are people using this? Because just because you put it in a book or write it on a sheet of paper, you have your process document, does not mean that people are going to use that.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, oh, I wrote it in an email. I don't understand why everyone's not getting, because you thought that you communicated it properly. So getting a prototype done quickly so that you can test it out, and you want to kind of do like small doses so you can test it out and see like, okay, well, what if you've created something, an interactive tool for folks to work with on, then you're looking at, okay, what you're asking, you're providing surveys following that, right? You are doing focus groups, you are getting from the user, like, was this effective? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? My favorite question is, if you had a magical wand, like, what would you do? How would you change this? Because they're experiencing it, you're designing it. So you have two
Mm-hmm.
very different points of views. They're not coming in at it into the experience like, okay, these are the steps to learning. And they're coming into the experience that I have to do this thing. My work said I have to go to this thing.
Yeah.
I'm here because. So if you can build in if you can gamify it, if you can make it fun, if you can, put some joy into it, if you can think about how you want them to feel as they go through it, like those are elements that are game changers because people want to feel good. People
Hmm.
want to have joy. So what might that look like in this experience? Test it out, get the feedback, go back to the drawing board, iterate. Find the spots where you can make significant impact with small tweaks.
Mm. Mm.
That's what you're looking for as the designer. You're like, okay, what would be that game changer? And that game changer is something that's intrinsic
Mm.
for the learner.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, yes. But keep that yes low. Like,
So, do you facilitate when you're doing the program? Do you facilitate the process? And how long does it usually take? Is it like a week? Is it a month? I mean, I know it would probably vary depending on the outcomes that the business or company might want, that type of thing. But usually, how long does a whole program take?
That's a great question. A lot of times people think like, oh, this is really quick. You're going to put this thing together and then we're just going to get it. Boom. Wow. And like, that's not exactly how it works. Typically, and they've done research on this. So typically for something to be like viable, right? A viable product, it takes about 40 hours to design 1 hour.
Oh, wow.
If you're doing something that's like really low stakes, really low res prototype, about 20 hours for 1 hour.
Wow.
So it's kind of thinking about like, what's the entry point? What do you want for your outcome? So something that's like 3 hours, if it's a 3 hour training, you want something that you can replicate and use again and again, and anyone on our team can do that. You're looking at between 120, 200 hours of work
Mm.
to get that complete. So I think people, I always have to kind of walk people back for
Yeah.
this is the project that you want. These are the outcomes that you want because we have to do research. We have to talk to people. And there are ways to speed it up. But when it comes to like the design and effectiveness to have those outcomes that you desire, because here's the thing, if it took 3 hours to do, this position wouldn't even exist.
Exactly. It's like there would be no need. And that's the thing. People think of things like that. Like as a writer, I remember when I worked in corporate in the office, people were like, "Oh, can you just write this?" It's like, well, if it was just like you're saying, you would just write it. Like I wouldn't be here doing this like this. But so I could see how you would have to explain because I had no idea it took that long. And
Yeah.
then to take all of those hours to put together a program that, like you said, I mean, usually when you go in to do the program with a group of people or however you do it, at that point, what's the average? Would you say it's like 3 days or a half a day workshop or just so people can kind of get an idea of how long the workshop itself takes
Yeah,
versus the time put into it?
that's a great question. Typically when I have a workshop coming up this summer, I'm working with a group to uh, do something with social emotional learners for learning for Black educators, focusing on that. And typically folks want to be like, oh, can you come and do it in an hour? And I'm like, an hour to like learn something that you want people to then like have some ownership with. You
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you can, but like where are your learners? right? Like if they already are using these strategies and have an understanding of something, of whatever skill you want to work on, yeah, I need to figure out where they are so I can design activities around that. But the reality is that people want to share what they know in these
Mhm.
training spaces. They want to have facilitated conversation around the topic, and they want to have clear takeaways. And when you're making room for others to talk, that's where facilitation comes into place.
Yeah.
Because once people understand how the protocol for how we are going to have conversations, you can move those things around. You can
Mhm.
move those things like a little faster. But I typically like to spend about minimum 3 hours on a topic. If the outcome or the goal of the training is that they're going through a process, well, processes take time.
Time.
You have to
Mhm.
practice that. You have to give feedback and you have to have conversation. Then we're looking at like a longer um, training.
So, how did you, because you mentioned pivoting, being an educator, it was easy for you to pivot into this. How did you decide to pivot into this direction? And if somebody was interested in doing this, because it is really interesting. If someone was interested in getting into this as maybe either a second career or something on the
Mm,
side, just to kind of learn more about it, can you give us information about that?
absolutely. As I shared, like I did begin as a classroom teacher, moved into designing out of school programs, and then I moved into a position where I do curriculum design. And through that position, I was like, that was a pivot for me because now I'm looking at this is the tool that educators are going to use to then deliver the student experience. And so I was able to get a lot of training. I was introduced to the um, design thinking process, which
Mm-hmm.
is a framework that guides you through human centered designing. This is something that a lot of universities are focusing on now, but I think like the heart of it started at Stanford at the D School. And so I started listening to podcasts, reading books, because I was utilizing that process in my new position. And through that
Mm-hmm.
position, I was able to get additional training. Like I got to go to the executive boot camp at the D School to learn from the people who do it every day. And I didn't realize just how much educators are designers. I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone is a designer, truly. And I think if you can reframe how you are approaching the work that you're doing so that you're like, oh, well, what is it that I'm actually doing? I am engaging all of these different humans, and they're all stakeholders, and I have to consider all of them as I'm designing whatever experience I'm designing, whether that is what is their entry point. They might not be there at the program, but the administrator has to have an entry point into even understanding what this program is. How's
Mm-hmm.
that translated to, the parents who also aren't there? They want to
Yeah.
know what their students are doing. How's that translate to the educators who were asking, hey, give up your time? So I found myself working with adults a lot more than I had in the past. And so that created this pivot into instructional design and thinking about, well, is this a skill? Is this a lack of skill or a lack of knowledge? And how can I bring them into it? So again, the information is everywhere. Read. I signed up for another workshop on instructional design. There are lots of workshops on like Coursera and you can access some of these free through your local public library.
Hmm.
I purchased books on how to use the design thinking process with instructional design and learn those strategies and practice them in my work so that I could build out my skill set. And I brought in other people who were doing the same thing And I said, hey, this is a way we could all pivot and build another skill set and then help each other because we're all using the same strategy. So right now, my team of designers, we're all working through the same book
Mm.
so that there's a shared language. And then we're able, once you cultivate your system and your way of doing things, then it's a plug and play.
Okay. Yeah. So then what kind of client? Is there a specific client that you're looking for with the services that you offer? Like what kind of client do you seek out?
A creative woman. Someone who, like, I truly am looking for someone who wants to solve the problem that they have,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that you can get a lot of like quick fixes, and the thing is that as people evolve within your system, within your teamwork, if that person leaves, all
Mm.
that information is walking out the door. And you're not going to hire someone who is typically, you're not going to hire someone that's right at that skill set
Yeah.
because it's an opportunity to like save money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, we can start back down here. So then if you're a small team, that really impacts how your team is moving. I would love to work with um, small teams because I know that they typically are asked to do a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
in the scope and are oftentimes over capacity. And that's truly a problem I would love to solve.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to go into spaces where maybe this is new as well, because I think that if you can empower the community that you're in to be problem solvers, to zoom out and think about like, oh, what would be the game changer in
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing, and strategize so that they can impact the people that they're serving. I would love to step into a space like that. It's a challenge sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with a mindset,
Yeah.
right? It's the design thinking process. So you have to shift how people are thinking, which is huge. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. So then let me ask, because I'm trying to get down to really the nuts and bolts of like, if there's somebody out there that needs your services, what kind of problems, just as what you've come across, some examples of problems that people might be wanting to solve. And like you
mhm,
said, especially if they're a small group, they might not even know they kind of have this problem, but sometimes you get so used to a problem, it becomes normal
yes.
versus,
Yeah.
this is an issue. There's someone out there that can help me fix it.
hmm
So what are
Yeah.
some examples?
Some examples would be just how to solve problems within their team. Like, do they have a strategy? Is it clear? And are all of their team members utilizing it? A lot of times I find people go to trainings and have these experiences, but like, how are you bringing that back to what you're doing
Mhm.
within your organization? So, anyone who's looking for how can we better facilitate our meetings so that we can actually get to solving the problem? A lot of times it can turn into dumping like a
Mhm.
rabbit hole. We're going down a rabbit hole. We're not even talking about the thing. We're just bringing up more and more problems. So if you're struggling with that, I can definitely help bring in some tools to help your team move through things with intention.
Mm.
Communication is also a really big challenge, I think. And I think anytime you're doing a project, communication is one of the major factors.
Yeah.
And so how are you communicating with your stakeholders? Is is that clear? Are they understanding
Mm.
what it is that you're even doing and how to come to you when they need support? And as well as effective management, I think like having the right protocols in place. I hear a lot, especially from early career professionals. I don't even know who I go talk to
Mm.
about task A, B, C, or the problem that I'm having. So being able to, it's more of a cultural and systems problem. I would definitely be interested in tackling some of those things. And I think that communication, how we work together as a team, and how we solve problems are in every single industry. And so that's where I would definitely like to work with. I've sat in a lot of staff meetings. And I was like, this could have been an email, right? Like we hear that. We hear that often. So how can we determine like what our staff meeting is even about, and how do I know who to bring in for projects? And again, like small organizations typically tend to have those challenges. I think I can be
Mm-hmm.
effective in those spaces.
Oh, okay. Great. Great. I was just, when you were talking, I was thinking about some of the positions I've had over the years, and like, you could have really been a great help. Like, because a lot of times, like, I guess when I'm hearing you, I'm thinking of the learner as being, of course, the employee, but the learner could be like if you have management that you need training or on the same page or thinking. I mean, there's so many industries and departments within the industry that could use your services.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I said, I'm sitting here like, man, she could have showed up at my office and really worked some things out, because everyone was crazy and all of our meetings were just like dumping
Yeah,
anything done.
I've been
So,
there too. Like,
yep, every meeting, you have this meeting once a week and it's like dump and 5 minutes worth of actual real work. But
Mhm.
so I'm trying to think what else? So can you just like give us an overview? Because again, this show is about women who are in midlife, and I use that term loosely, 40 to whatever. Um, what would you say? How would you describe your life now? Because you do, it sounds like what you want to do and what you enjoy doing. How do you see Tori-Ann Hampton in the prime of her midlife right now?
This is an exciting question. When I saw it in your email, I was like, oh, midlife. Like, I was like,
Right?
what is that? I just turned 40 this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on like what patterns have I even noticed in my own life, and like do I want to continue that pattern,
Yeah.
because I already did the first half of my life that way. Did I like it? Um so now, one thing that I am very excited about is just defining things how I see it. I don't need someone to tell me I am something, or, X, or I can do this or do this. Like, no, I put time into researching, I put effort into training. I learned how to do these things, and I can learn how to do anything.
Yep.
And so understanding my brain, understanding how past experiences impacted me, and deciding like, oh, do I want to stunt on people every day? Yeah, I'm gonna stunt today. And
Yeah.
that I can do that. And I think like that confidence, that it was like I mourned like my first part of life, because I spent so much time
Mhm.
thinking about how do I live up to these norms, and oh, I didn't reach this goal yet that I thought I should reach. And
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time um worrying about that. And like, go when I think about that reflection, I'm like, okay, I already did that. I
Mm-hmm.
worried. I tried to be how and what I thought others wanted. And now I like just saying what it is that I feel and how I feel it, and calling stuff out and
Exactly.
hey, That's not going to work for me. Or I need to go and take this walk and my brain needs to process all of this information. Or
Mhm.
I want to do this podcast. So I'm going to get on this podcast and talk to Sherri. If I know what I'm talking about 10 years ago, I wouldn't have done it.
But see, that's exactly why I think midlife is so important. People start fretting and, oh, I'm getting older. I mean, the alternative, you don't want that. So the only thing you can really do is embrace it. But so many things happen when you're younger and as you move along in age. When you get to 40, 40 plus, you do, like you said, you sort of reflect. You realize that you don't need anyone's approval. You really kind of, and let me tell you, as you get older, you'll realize that more and more and more. You will be like, I don't care. I'm doing what I do. But I like to ask that because I think it's so important for people out there that might be struggling
Yeah.
with it, with getting older. And it's nothing to fear. It's actually something to just embrace, have fun with it, and realize, like you said, as you're getting older, you don't have to apologize. You just do what, and you've got the experience. You don't need to wait for anyone to see you. So, yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, Tori-Ann, if you could share with us how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in just following up with you, using your services, how can they get in contact with you?
Yes. Thank you, Sherri. And thank you for the opportunity to even share that information.
Mhm.
Absolutely. If anyone wants to get in contact with me regarding my work as an instructional designer, facilitator, you can reach me at helloblissfulcontent@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Tori-Ann Hampton. All of my full name without the hyphen.
Okay.
And so those are the best ways to, and also on LinkedIn, Tori-Ann Hampton, like shoot me a message. That's how I even met Sherri.
I found you. Exactly. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we'll have to have you back and
Thank
just to follow up and see what's going on. So thank you.
thank you so much, Sherri.
You're listening to the Mature Allure podcast. I'm your host, Sherri O. If you have a topic in mind that you'd like us to cover on Mature Allure, drop us a note in the comments or share it with us on one of our social media channels. Until the next time, remember, self-love is the key to unlocking the radiant allure that shines from within.